This stuff can be very difficult for some people, and it was very difficult for me when I was really young because it was communicated to me in a very complicated way, unnecessarily complicated. Hello, I'm the Bun. Welcome to the channel. This here is Baritone Obsessed. This is a show all about long scale guitars for going super low. Today's show, we're going to talk about all the numbers that you keep hearing flying around. G1 standard, E1 standard, C2 drop. What are these numbers? And how do they function and all that kind of stuff. Some people get it right away. A lot of people ask a lot of questions about them. Today's episode is brought to us by everybody with me over at Patreon and YouTube memberships. Thank you very much to everybody with me over there, and the links are down below if you'd like to get involved yourself.
Hey Bun, what are those numbers that you guys are always using with your low tunings? You know, like G1 standard or F0 or drop C2? What's up with the numbers, man?
In the world of super low tune guitars, we often need to communicate octave numbers so that folks know what we're talking about. For example, I have a project called Foreigns. Foreigns guitars are tuned to G1 standard with the bass in G0 standard. Then there's Wetlands. Wetlands tunes both the guitar and the bass in unison E1 standard. They are in the same octave. There are a lot of conflicting numbers and terms flying around, so let's get clear on some of that stuff first before we get into the octaves. First thing that we're gonna square away is string numbers. A lot of people know what the string numbers are, but maybe some people don't. On a 6-string guitar, if you go from the highest string to the lowest string, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Highest string is 1, the lowest string is 6. Standard, we're gonna use the word standard a lot. Standard tuning and standard guitars. What are we talking about when we're talking about standard tuning versus standard guitars? We're gonna be talking about standard tuning because there are a million tunings out there, and standard tuning is standard. It's gonna be the clearest thing to talk about that everyone can communicate on. Standard tuning, what is standard tuning? It means tuned in fourths. The second and the third string are a third apart, but the rest of the strings are a fourth apart. What is a fourth apart? That is the interval between the strings. What is an interval? It is the distance between two notes. If you count the notes as they fall in the major scale, the Ionian mode, a fourth is the fourth note in the scale. Easy. A fourth is the fourth note of the major scale. What is the major scale? It is 7 notes, 8 notes if you repeat the octave. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So just 1, 2, 3, 4. Standard tuning does not mean E2 tuning. Standard tuning is the type of tuning. So it's the fourths tuning where all the strings are a fourth apart except for string 2 and 3. They're a third apart. People confuse this all the time. They're like, standard tuning is E standard tuning. It is not. Standard tuning just means the intervals between the notes. That's all it means. The guitars we're gonna be talking about is a standard guitar, which is 24.75 to 25.5 inches in scale, tuned to E2 standard in a standard fourths tuning. With baritone guitars, we're talking about C2 standard down to F1, ranging from 26.5 inches in scale to 30 inches in scale. When we talk about bass sixes, we're talking about E1 standard or lower on 30-inch scale guitars or longer. And when we're talking about bass guitars, we're also talking about E1 standard or lower, 30 inches in scale or longer. So a lot of blurry lines here. I hope that sort of sets the stage for talking about octaves, and you're gonna be able to tell the difference between all the numbers and all that kind of stuff. If not, leave a comment down below. So let's talk about the octaves. We're gonna talk about the octave ranges, how they are grouped, and weird stuff that you will encounter on the internet. If you're out there, you're gonna find some conflicting information, and we're gonna try and make sense of what those conflicts mean and how to navigate it. Octaves and their numbers. If we take a look at E2 standard tells us the tuning type and the octave that the tuning resides in. What's an example tuning of guitar? Baritone guitar, bass 6, and bass. I don't know if we need to do bass 6 and bass. It's essentially the same. Standard guitar, E2 standard, which is E2, A2, D3, G3, B3, and E4. Looking at a bass 6, it's generally an octave down. So E1 standard, which is E1, A1, D2, G2, B2, E3. A baritone tuning, one that I use is A. So A1, which would be A1, D2, G2, C3, E3, and A3. The guitar I use for foreigns is tuned to G1 standard. So G1, C2, F2, A sharp 2, D3, and G3. So that's my baritone guitar for foreigns. How octaves are grouped, we would assume that it goes from A to G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Repeat, repeat, next octave. The octave actually changes between B and C, always. B up to C, higher number, higher octave. C down to B, lower number, lower octave. I assume it has to do with the way that the keyboard is divided at middle C. Also, C major doesn't have any sharps or flats. If there's anything to remember here, is when you're tuning down, anytime you go from C down to B, it's gonna be another octave down. There's a really good chance that you're going to run into conflicting information on the interwebs. In my very first search, I found this. As far as the language goes, it is well written, professionally formatted, and extensive. The only oddity is it presents the guitar in the range of E1 to E3, which is weird for such a serious presentation. Like, this is a well put together paper. In addition to this little paper, I had an experience with a VST-based tuner. VST-based tuner, does that make sense? And that tuner read everything as an octave higher. So an E standard guitar would read from E3 to E5. When I discovered this, I shared it with the developers, and I was like, hey, your tuner, it's great, but it reads in the wrong octave. And the response was, oh yeah, well, in certain European regions, octave designations are different. And I was like, what? I don't think so. Maybe that's true. Recently, I re-downloaded that tuner and checked it, and it's actually been updated. So it does adhere to convention now, which is interesting, which is good. Just makes it easier for everybody, less confusing, all that kind of stuff. If you'd like to examine that convention for yourself in the real world, a great place is string calculators. So string tension calculators, the Stringjoy tension calculator, the Kurt Mangan calculator, the Callium calculator, the D'Addario calculator. There's a whole bunch of them. I'll put links to all of them down below. The D'Addario one's kind of effed up right now, but the rest of them are really good. Even Wikipedia. If you go to Wikipedia and you go to the guitar page, I'll put the link to that down below as well. Thanks again to everyone with me over at Patreon and YouTube memberships. The links to that are down below. If Patreon and YouTube memberships is not your thing, but you'd still like to get involved in some kind of way, there is music available for download and stream. There is merch, all kinds of stuff, and there are creative assets, such as drum MIDI and HELIX presets. Huge thanks to everybody who has ever participated in any way, ever. My parting thought on all this is I'm not trying to be right, and I don't care about being right. I just want to understand, and hopefully all of us sort of understand in the same way, so that we can all freely communicate effectively. That's the most important thing. That's the most important part of this show. This stuff can be very difficult for some people. And it was very difficult for me when I was really young because it was communicated to me in a very complicated way, unnecessarily complicated. Music theory, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's 7 notes, man. And then learning the sharps and flats, no problem. B and C and E and F are a semitone apart. That's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one.